Welcome to the Unconventional Path, Entrepreneurship and Innovation Stories and Ideas. Hello, I'm bela.and.mike.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Hey, Mike, today's guest on the podcast, we have two people, Derek Slayton and Sean Magee. They are the founders and owners of Trampoline Design. They work with companies in developing branding and advertising campaigns to build customer awareness and recognition. They have built their business slow and steady in a very, very competitive space.
Yeah, Bela, two guests at one time. I know this is a lot for you to manage, so I'm pretty excited. And I love the name Trampoline Design. I can't wait to hear about this. And I never feel like I can learn enough about media and branding. I mean, there's lots of different philosophies, and I know this. It's always changing. There's always something new and some new tool and some new TikTok and Insta and all these things that I should know more about. And it always seems simple on one hand, like, okay, let's build this brand that represents us. Yeah. But it's really complicated on the others and all the meaning behind it and everything. So I always like when we have people that know about this, that are smarter than me about this on the show. So I think let's just dive in and listen to the interview with Derek and Sean.
Sounds good, Mike. Hi, Derek. Hi, Sean. And welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Glad to be here, Bela. Thank you.
Thanks for agreeing to do this. So I have a question for you, and either one of you guys can take this. So if you're at a social event, a non-work related social event, and you get introduced to someone you've never met before, and after that introduction, they say to you, "Oh, very nice to meet you. What do you do?" How do you answer that question?
Sean, you take this one.
Okay. We get attention. And we turn heads, and we're in the advertising business, and it's our job to create something that's impossible to ignore and gets in your head and is unforgettable. And so that's my answer to that question is we're attention getters.
Yeah, well, that's a good answer. So let's peel that back a little bit. So, tell me more. So the person you're talking to says, "Hey, tell me more." Keep going.
Sure. And in terms of deliverables, what we provide are creative concepts, graphic design, and layout and marketing. We do a lot of writing, copywriting, and sort of creating a sense of what a business or an organization or a destination is. And we do also have a lot of in-house video production that we do.
Okay. So, as I think about this as a business owner, 30 years ago, I had a few choices. I could advertise in a newspaper, I could advertise on TV, radio, and maybe a trade magazine or publication that went out to my customers. But now the field is like super broad. So how do you, when you think about doing this for a business, how do you sort of sort through which is the right venue or media for propagating this message out?
A lot of it comes down to budget. What we're talking about, how wide a net we're going to cast, whether it's a national campaign or something more regional, and it can really vary. We try and surround people with the brand's message as much as possible. So we try and really use as many different avenues as we can in terms of media space. But it depends. Some are more cost effective than others, like social versus, say, a TV buy. And it all depends on what their end goals are and what their budget is. And my dog is barking, so I'm going to fix that.
Okay.
And to tagline to tag that, I was going to say tagline that. That's a popular thing we do too. Tagline. So tagging that, I think it's really getting where their audience is going to be intaking the message. Where is this business's audience going to be? For example, we are undergoing a nurse recruitment campaign for a hospital. And, they're recruiting, the way they're recruiting, traditionally has been through print and maybe radio, but more likely some trade publications and some recruiting companies, headhunters. But
Yes.
the way media is being taken in these days, TikTok has come up, especially for this audience that they may be, spending a lot of time on. So we were talking about using TikTok as a possible tool for this, specifically for nurse recruitment, and that's changed. That's completely different from what we would have done 10, 5, and even a year ago.
Yeah. 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 It seems like it's gotten a lot more complex. There's a lot more variables. And as a small business owner, man, I really need someone to help me sort through all this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's still what the big idea is, what the message is, and who your audience is. But now it's almost like we're serving as a consultant to where do you want to be and where should you be? Because there are so many more options out there. In outdoor, let's take outdoor, for example. Vehicles are such a popular and effective way to spread a message and get awareness, in ways, not just putting a logo on a door, but in the way you wrap a vehicle, in the way a vehicle looks. I mean, look at Red Bull's vehicles when they drive by. It's a as a literal as you can get bull on, or packaging on a vehicle that just you cannot turn away from this thing. So it's really opened up a lot of doors and opportunities, and it's really up to us to find those. Sometimes it's really not exactly in front of you. Another example is, this goes back a little bit, but we had a state basketball tournament coming to town. It was an annual thing, and the high schools from across New York State would gather in Glens Falls and play a weekend of games through these tournaments. And what we did for awareness and sort of to announce the games, one of the things we did was bannering, and in addition to bannering, lights. So like essentially theater lights broadcast from one building, cast onto another building, just a big wide open space. So we ended up using several spaces in the downtown Glens Falls area with lights, and the light cast was a figure or silhouettes of basketball players. And so we had a graphic that goes with that, essentially a large gobo light is what they were.
Mhm.
So that occupied space in people's minds that no canvas had ever been used like that before. So
Yeah.
it was kind of neat and interesting.
Yeah. So, with some of these various different media things, it's sort of easier to measure results. You can figure out if people clicked on it, how long they spent reading it, if they took any action, et cetera. With other ones, it's a lot more nebulous to try to measure how things are going. How do you guys think about that?
I think awareness is a long game and conversions are a short game. And awareness is nice to have, but sales are always nicer. And we try and strike the balance between that. I think, in a crowded marketplace and in a social marketplace, if you're creating content for a client and it gets shared, it's worth sharing. It's that outside endorsement. A lot of times, as hard as we work to create a brand, it's less what we say and less what the brand puts out there, and more about how they are reviewed on Yelp or TripAdvisor.
Yeah.
So I think awareness and control of your message is one thing, and then conversions or website clicks are another. And it goes way past marketing into business strategy and pricing and things like that, because you could have an incredible ad campaign that lands people on your website, and then they bounce because whatever's being offered isn't
Right.
compelling enough.
Right.
So,
or the website's difficult to use.
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
it's there's a lot of moving parts for sure.
Yeah.
We like to crow about the effectiveness of our campaigns. We started doing that, I want to say maybe 10 years ago, because what we do, creating brand identities or ad campaigns, is so subjective. It can work for one person and it can really not work for another, and neither one of them is necessarily wrong. So we have tended to really push some of our results for campaigns in terms of ticket sales or in terms of reservations or targeting a specific market, like transient guest stays, for example, for a hotel. Because that's a good way for us to say, hey, this is working. We do understand how to carve up a message in a way that's easily digestible and that matters to people.
Yeah. So let's say I was a small business owner. I was doing about $1 million a year in sales. I sort of have a product or service that reaches about 100 miles from where I'm located. And I rung you guys up and I said, hey, I want to expand my reach. I want to double my business size in the next 3 to 5 years. And the way I need to do that is to get more customers, and I need to expand my geographic reach. Walk me through how we would sort of go down that path.
Well, nobody wants to give a budget, but that's what we would look to do. And if your goals are that specific about here's what I gross in a year and I want to double that, we're going to start by saying we'd like to see you spending at least 3% of your gross on creative and media. And then if your goal is to grow that, we want you to budget more to expand your footprint.
Yeah.
And it's going to be more media than it is creative, probably.
Yeah, let's say I'm willing to spend 10% on advertising and promotion out of my gross. So that's $100,000, right?
So we would look to, obviously it's very, Derek mentioned it earlier, it's very dependent on audience. Who is it you're looking to target? And then go figure out where those eyeballs are from a media standpoint, and then come up with a creative campaign that's going to matter to that group, which gets down to the psychology behind why they're going to make their purchase decisions or why they're going to use your product or service or visit your destination. What's the why?
Okay.
We would probably also ask, and maybe this isn't asked enough in general of marketing firms and potential clients, but we also ask, if this goes well, are you prepared to scale up from the demand that a campaign could generate?
Yeah.
And that's and that scaling up is important because, that it's tied to growth and it's tied to, how a business responds is very important, other than just, hey, is it working? Well,
right.
What happens when it works? Are you ready?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Being prepared for success. Sometimes we're not.
Right.
Yeah. So let's say my company made chocolate. I make chocolate bars, and I distribute them through a dozen or so retailers here in sort of the greater geographic area, and I want to expand that footprint. Again, I'm trying to help educate our listeners to say, who may be someone who's never done this before, what's sort of involved, how long does it take, how many conversations do we have? Just help me understand that a little bit better.
I think that's a very consumer facing message, and we would be asking questions to develop a campaign to answer the question, why buy your chocolate bar and not a Snickers? What's the reason? What expectations can people have? What sort of quality exists? What do you offer that someone else isn't offering? What are they only going to find? What is the emotion and the feeling that they're only going to get from your chocolate bar? Who's it for? Is it a family-facing message? Is it for kids? Is it for adults who are looking for a dark chocolate getaway in the middle of their afternoon? Because those are very different messages, and it can be both. If you have the budget to segment and you have a strong brand, and you're consistent in the use of that brand, and you have a good reputation, then you can go and sell over here to this group, and you can sell over there to that group. It all ties back. Is that sort of what you were looking for?
Yeah. So that's helpful. So one of the messages I hear you saying is that as a business owner, I sort of have to have my strategic act together. I sort of need to know where I want to go. So then you can help me get there. And
I think an agency worth their salt will ask questions to help frame that up for a business owner or identify opportunities. But yeah, essentially what we're being presented with as a vendor is a communications problem. It's something that people can't necessarily solve on their own, and they're looking for solutions and deliverables that are going to move the needle for them.
Yeah, and sometimes there's a strategy that maybe that they're not aware of, they haven't come to the table with, they need help with the actual strategy, particularly in media. Let's take, for example, they need to get out there, they have a certain budget, and they're like, okay, so what's the best course of action here? How long is this going to last? So we kind of map out the timing of it according to the budget. What's the most effective ways that we can get you out there, and where's that going to be? And then that informs, that's sort of your vehicle of message delivery. And what is that message delivery going to look and sound and feel like? And that's when we kind of go through the steps of figuring out what that message is going to be, and figuring out where in the strategy that's going to be mapped. But yeah, it's really also a competitive set, I think, is one of the biggest tools that we have to help that strategy. Who are you going against? Like Sean mentioned earlier, why your chocolate bar than somebody else's, and we get a visual on who their competitive set is, and that helps inform a message too. Sometimes we come up with these big ideas, and whether it's a tagline or a business name or a campaign, and we have to vet all that. We have to go through, sometimes U.S. Trademark and Patent Office, all the time Google, and search out, is this going to be different enough? Has it been done? Chances are it's all been done. It's how you kind of spin it. So
Yeah.
Derek will confirm this, that in this specific example, I don't like chocolate. So if I could turn myself into a consumer of this particular product, we'll know we did our job.
Excellent. If I can we can get you to try it. Yeah. Or at least buy it and gift it to others.
There you go.
Working together for 25 years, and he still has to remind me that he does not like chocolate. Very unusual.
Yeah, that is very unusual. So if let's say we're going to do this, go back to the chocolate company, I'm going to spend 10% of my total revenue, 100 grand a year. How, from the day I call you up to say, hey, I'm interested in doing this, to the time that we actually start putting stuff out there that potential customers can see, what is that time horizon like?
I think that can depend largely on the size of the agency, the creative agency, and how much volume they have, how much market share they have. For us, we're around the neighborhood of 20 people. And so we're not a huge company by any means, but we're not a smaller sort of boutique shop. We're kind of in between. So for us, it would take, I don't know, anywhere between 6 weeks to develop all of the creative and strategy. Another big variable is on the client side. That's a really tough question to ask, because it depends on how you get feedback and how much of it and how organized it is. There are a lot of variables in speed to market. If we've done our due diligence and we have done our research as to what the client wants, and we've got some good creative direction, it can be very streamlined. And then in other examples, if you have to, for example, please a board of directors that has 12 different people on it, it can be a much slower process.
That adds another 6 months right there.
Yeah.
It also depends on the company size. Is this a startup?
Yes.
Because as a startup, there's an enormous amount of branding that needs to go on the front end, and then you're talking packaging. Whereas if it's an established business that wants to reach into another market, very different timelines there. In terms of setup and go-to-market strategy and a lot of other things. So, normally a lot longer for a startup, because you do need to establish that brand and how that's going to look, and how does that appear in, on its packaging and in advertisements, and a lot of undone stuff there that you need to establish.
Yeah, and do you guys help with all of that stuff? I mean, with logos and taglines and getting them registered and doing all those things that you have to do?
Yes, we do.
Oh, okay.
And as part of that creative and discovery process, like I might say something like, not everybody likes chocolate. What do you think about the peanut butter market?
Yes.
And who are you ignoring by not offering a peanut butter
Yeah.
option? So a lot of
Okay.
it crosses the boundary out of marketing into business strategy, into goals,
Yeah.
into sales, which is very different from marketing. We're always very careful if we have a client that has a sales force. We want to make sure that they're bought into whatever it is that we're creating, because ultimately, if they're the execution arm, we want them to believe in what is being put out there. And again, that's more moving parts. It's more people. It's more opinions to consider. But that's how to do it, I think, successfully, is allowing the stakeholders to be heard, and as it's being created. And a lot of times we're making something out of nothing. We're pitching ideas. We're saying, what if the photograph looked this way, or what if the logo was these colors instead of those? And it's a lot of versioning,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a lot of it's just having the ability to kind of make the decision and move forward.
Yeah. So let me ask a little bit again about the process. Let's say just to keep it simple, we're working on a new logo. Would typically you guys, we'd have some conversations about it. You guys would go off and generate some internal samples. You guys would talk about it. And then do you come back to me and say, here's 3 that we recommend and we think I pick it? Or do you say, this is the one we highly recommend and these other 2 are like B-bit players? How does that process work?
Well, some folks want input and insight and consultancy, and some folks want the logo that they want. So it works both ways for us, where we have somebody just choose. They pick what they respond to, and what they think their customers will respond to. But we also we're pretty opinionated when it comes to design. So we'll also offer our recommendations and why.
Sure.
And that usually holds some sway. But I don't know, Derek, what do you think?
Well, the process by which we kind of come up with all this stuff is we get in the weeds with the clients and with a lot of Q&A, and we have what we call the test bounce, which is a discovery process. Basically, we take the clients through things like what you like. We answered some questions there, but what don't you like? What colors are you adverse to? And we go through these series of questions so that when we finally present something visually, it's not, it's very informed, and so there's reasoning behind what we end up showing. So that process is very helpful, and it gets the clients very involved, and they feel like they've been heard. So again, when they start to see these visuals, they start to connect the dots and like, oh yeah, you guys did ask a question about that. And one of the questions we ask is, if your business was a famous person, who would it be?
Mm-hmm.
It could be a musician, it could be a politician, it could be an actor or actress. Who would that be? And that question sort of hones it down to how a business feels about itself. How it wants to be perceived, and it's just a different way of connecting those dots. But we end up showing, I think the most versions we've ever shown is probably, I shouldn't say this, but 8. I think the client specifically wanted 8 logos. I don't know why that number, but they essentially paid for that amount of versions. But normally we'll show between 3 or 4 options, and from those options, people can take right away, 1 or 2 off the board. But we usually come with an expected version from what we've talked about. Then we have one that pushes the envelope a little bit, like I didn't see that one, but okay. And then usually there's a dark horse. We call it the dark horse, or something very unexpected, off the grid, out of left field. Leaves people with thinking like, where did that come from? And oftentimes, that's the one people can't take their eyes off of. It's informed somehow. It didn't come out of left field, but visually it does look very different from the other 2. So that's part of the process, and to get our clients involved as much as possible to their sort of limit is real important.
Yeah, those are great points. So if I'm a small business owner, and I'm thinking of engaging and hiring someone to help me do something like we just talked about, let's say this chocolate thing. What characteristics, what should I be looking for when I'm talking to folks like you? And let's say I'm interviewing 3 or 4 companies like yourselves. There's obvious things like the size of the firm, its geographic location, but take me through some of those various different parameters that I should be considering.
I think you want an agency with ownership and leadership that likes chocolate.
All right, so you guys are history.
Shot myself right in the
Well,
foot.
I love chocolate, so we balance each other out that way.
All right.
I think you want, you want an agency that if you're doing your research, you've got their website to look at, you have word of mouth, reputation, endorsements, recommendations, you have their social media, which is for us, it's a pretty regular sort of outpouring of either recent work or culture pieces about the staff. If you're interviewing agencies, then they're each going to put together a proposal. There's the price component to consider, but I will say one thing that we've run up against is that we've lost work to specialists. We've lost, for example, we do some work in the higher ed space, and there are agencies out there just like ours that's all they do.
Right.
And there is value to that because they understand the market and they're running focus groups, but they're only talking to students or they're only talking to parents, and so that's good. Also, though, their deliverables can sort of become variations on a theme. They might not have an outsider's perspective or something that,
yes,
to Derek's point, could occupy a space in someone's mind that they weren't aware of. We've been careful to not niche ourselves out. A lot of what we do is destination marketing. It's where are you going to spend your time? Where is a consumer going to spend their money? What is the value? Is there any kind of guarantee that I'm going to have a good time or that it's going to look good on Instagram? So what else to consider as you're shopping agencies, Derek?
I think the initial conversations, if you are reaching out, or for small businesses reaching out to specific, if they've done some research initially and found, 3 or 4 agencies that they deem, worthy or interesting or worth talking to, and that conversation happens, I think you can get a lot of a feel from the initial conversation. Who you talking to? Necessarily, it's not necessarily the owner. Sean and I don't take all the phone calls. We have a staff of account managers, and it could be any one of us, answering that initial call. But how does that feel? Do they sound like they know what they're talking about? Do they sound like they're too busy to even ask a question?
Right.
So sometimes that in-person thing that we lost a little bit of in COVID is important. Did they sound like they even want to work with you? I think when Sean kind of joked about not liking chocolate, a lot of the people that we work with, businesses we work with, a number of times we are fans of the activity or the service.
Yes.
We use that service. We serve the ski industry. Quite a bit of our branding work is in, different ski areas and resorts. And, we're all, not all of us, but a majority of us are skiers and snowboarders. So there's that enthusiasm, that that love for the product that we ultimately would be, helping to market.
Yeah. So how important is geography? And what I mean by that is this the type of relationship where it's important for us to be in the same room and look each other eyeball to eyeball? Or is it, can it be done? I'm sure it can be done virtually, but what do you miss when you try to do something like a relationship like this virtually?
Well, I think there's 2 sides, and maybe Sean, you could take one and I could take the other, but I think internally for us, not outward facing to the client, but internally, we learned a lot from COVID.
Sure.
And becoming remote, and to us initially, video conferences and that sort of relationship we didn't see or endorse. We always wanted it in person. We would always go to, that prospective client, or they would come to us. So that was very important. And COVID changed that, not only with clients but with our internal staff. And we missed the internal conversations and bouncing ideas off of,
Right.
of one another.
Right.
We're getting back into that as we have this hybrid situation, and those are always valuable. Those little nuances that you can't quite get from a Zoom or a Skype, and that's sort of inward facing. Outward facing, I think it's more flexible than ever to not have to be in the same room. We've had some clients on the West Coast and in the South that it's not always vital to be on every in person, every conversation.
Sure.
I think it helps to have FaceTime. That's certainly a factor. Sooner or later, you do want to meet, your clients. At least for us, it's an important, FaceTime is important. But John, add to that. I think there's a healthy balance.
I don't think I'd add to it. I would just summarize it. I would say that there's strategy and there's execution. And for strategy, nothing replaces an in-person meeting where you can read the body language, you can riff off one another, you can watch an idea grow exponentially as people contribute to it around a table. That is way more efficient and organic to be done in person.
Yeah.
On an execution standpoint, so you have strategy and you have execution. For us, a lot of times it's the graphic design problem, and you want to set that problem in front of a talented creative and just have them put their headphones on and solve it visually. Or if it's with a video capture, we've got to create a 30-second edit. It has to say X, Y, and Z. You can go out and shoot that anywhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a given place. But so strategy in person, definitely framing everything up, goal setting, etc. Execution could be done anywhere. And execution goes into the management and the rollout of a campaign. I think you could do that very efficiently remotely. Doesn't have to be all around the same table necessarily, but for certain things, it's helpful.
Yeah. So we've been talking for 30 minutes now, slightly over that. So I want to start wrapping this up. Where's the best place for listeners to kind of reach out and contact you guys?
I would say our website. There's a lot of examples of our work on the website and a lot of recent blog posts with both insight and sort of announcements and things like that. You can keep up with us at Design Tramp on Instagram. We're also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok.
Okay.
There.
And just so we're clear, and I'll make sure I put all this in the show notes, it's trampolinedesign.com.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Super. Very good.
The Design Tramp, by the way, our email is designtramp.com, which stems from when we first started that trampolinedesign.com was actually taken by an entity. And so I think we were 5 years in, maybe 10, actually, maybe more than that, 8 years in by the time we were able to actually buy that.
Yep.
But by that time, our emails were so ingrained, we're like, let's not even change that.
Right. Yeah. And you guys should be experts about changing things like that.
I know.
And you said, no, we don't want to change it.
No.
So, hey, is there anything that I haven't asked you that we should talk about?
You had mentioned something about takeaway. Name a few takeaways from being in business over a number of years. And I think that I thought about that. As a business owner and as an entrepreneur managing people, I think managing people is a big one. How to effectively manage them, how to talk about their well-being and making sure that they're okay, and without getting too there's a lot of issues that you want to stay away from too. You have to learn to navigate that that staff landscape, the staffing part. And, we recently got a director of HR. She's been with us for what, Sean, 3 years now, which has helped tremendously. And we went all that time without one. Now I'm not sure if we could get by without a manager of HR. So that's a big takeaway. And then, I think as far as running a business and being effective and doing the best work you can do is never done. Like it's always for us something, there's always something to strive for, and always something, we don't like to be stagnant. So things are always changing. I guess that's the easiest thing you can count on, is change will always happen. Will always be different. So those are my takeaways.
Yeah, that's great.
My first boss out of college, I was an intern in an agency, and I asked the guy what he thought about this internet thing. What do you think is going to become of the internet? And he went, internet? CB of the 90s. He thought it wasn't going to be much more than just a CB radio for people to talk to one another with. So we don't want to be here.
Right. All right. Well, that was really great. I really appreciate you guys being on the podcast. Thank you so much. And one more time, trampolinedesign.com.
That's it. Thanks for having us,
Bela.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Bela, okay, you did a great job managing both of them. High energy guys. What a great pair of people. What were your takeaways from the interview?
Well, I think it goes back to what you said in the introduction. Branding is so important. It's how people think about your company, your product, how you differentiate yourself from the crowd, both with your current customers and future customers. And I just think it's so important. And I think most companies sort of let this evolve naturally, and it sort of just happens. It's very similar, as I think this oftentimes with culture in a business. The culture just sort of happens. People don't really set out and say, this is how I want to do this. This is the brand. This is the image that I want to project, that I want my employees to feel. I want my customers to feel. I want my suppliers to feel. And I think that's another important part. You have to be consistent across all of those things. So it's not just your customers you're dealing with. It's the people that work with you and the people you interact with, your suppliers, your vendors, your distributors, your salespeople. All of those have to sort of think about the business and the products in sort of a similar identity and brand. So I think it's really, really important. What thoughts do you have about this, Mike?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Bela. And even employer branding is really important. Now, I have a lot of students that are really interested in how employees or companies brand themselves to potential employees and current employees, and even meaning there that I think it's been around for a while, but it's something that's really important recently. This idea that they talked about of the process between awareness by these different stakeholders to conversion, let's say for customers, right, to actually buy the product, or for a potential employee to apply for a job, right? Let's say this idea of awareness to conversion to me was really neat to think about. And I liked how they framed that. I loved how Sean talked about the links between business strategy and brand design and messaging, that this was kind of a 3 parts to this approach to help a small business or any business, right, kind of find their brand, find their design, find their message, and get customers driven to the whatever it is, their storefront or their website or however they're engaging. I love the idea of the test bounce. I don't know if you caught that, right? But Trampoline Design, they call it, we did a test bounce. I love that. That's branding right there as a great example of that.
Exactly.
But yeah, so I mean, this was a company, this isn't an ad and they don't pay us or whatever, but the way my mind thinks and the way I've worked with startups, these are people that I would love to hire that I think a similar way that I do. Sometimes that's dangerous, right? But you want somebody that's different. But I loved how they had this unified whole, that it wasn't just a logo that they were designing, but they're helping the small business owner with their strategy, identify their target market, figure out the right message to light up that target market and get them to convert into something that's actionable. And I just love the way they put that. It really resonated with at least my small brain business mind works.
Yeah, Agreed.
I mean, put your VC hat on. When you were advising startups, Bela, how did you advise funding teams to kind of deal with branding and marketing at the early stages?
Yeah, that's interesting, Mike, because you go to most company pitches as a venture capitalist, and they have a product roadmap where they talk about the product, and this is generation 1, and this is generation 2, and they talk about the various benefits and features and specifications, but they never talk about, I shouldn't say never, very rarely do they talk about a branding roadmap and how it needs to parallel or be part of the product roadmap. I think about it as all part of the same thing. There's the company roadmap, the product roadmap, the branding roadmap, and as you said, strategically, they're all aligned and they all have to go in the same direction. But companies very, very rarely think about branding, how they're going to position themselves in the marketplace. What words and concepts and images are they going to use to describe their product, to convey that product to their customers and potential employees, et cetera, all the various different constituencies they deal with. So I think it's really important. And I think in many ways, some people feel that companies like Trampoline Design, well, I don't need that in the beginning. I know how to do all this stuff. And they really don't. And I think they learn that lesson the hard way, because just like various different professions and skills, that's what it is. It's a skill and it's a talent. And the folks at Trampoline have that. And I think that came across loud and clear. And I think it should give listeners an appreciation for how important and valuable a company like this can be to helping position your company and your products and services across all the various different constituencies you think about. And like I said, most early stage companies and young companies just don't pay attention to this because they're so focused on getting their product out to their customer and then kind of servicing their customer and making sure their customer's happy, which is very important. This is not an either or situation. This is an and. You have to do all of these things. And that's why starting a company and being an entrepreneur is so challenging, right? There's so many different balls to juggle.
Yeah, but I loved how they made it simple. Know your audience, know your value proposition, which is what's distinctive about your product or service vis-a-vis your competitors. I always call this the value proposition. And then I love the idea that plan on doing some advice and some budget, connecting strategy, brand, and message. Right.
Yep.
And what can you afford? I loved how you were talking about that, right? You got to figure out what can you afford and how is it going to work? Okay. And I think these are the kind of people that you can sit down and they'll take you through step by step. And it is complicated, but they can kind of make it simple.
Right. I agree.
My last question for you is, what do you think about how entrepreneurs should pick an agency to work with? Right? Like this. What questions should they be asking? What should they be looking for?
Well, I think you want to find a couple different things. One is, most importantly, I think you want to find a company or a group of individuals or wherever you deal with, someone you click with, someone that you feel the connection with, because you're going to work pretty closely with them. So you want to work with someone that you have a connection with somehow. I don't know what all that means, right? But there's some kind of connection. That doesn't necessarily mean you agree on everything, because I think debate and conversation in these topics is really, really important. So I don't think this is one of those relationships where, that's what we want to do. Yes, that's what we want to do. This is a conversation and a debate and a discussion about what to do. And it's really, really important. And the other questions I would ask is give me some examples of companies like my company that you've worked with.
Yeah, good.
So if the marketing, if the Trampoline only worked with Fortune 500 companies, that's probably not right for me, a sub $1 million a year company. So you want someone that sort of plays around with companies of your size or your size range, or maybe the size where you're trying to get to. Right? That's probably maybe a better way to look at it, is I'm trying to get to the $20 million a year business. So let me go find a firm like Trampoline that deals with companies that are in that, 10 to $30 million a year segment, because that's where I'm trying to achieve and go to. And then I think some understanding of your industry may be important, because I believe every industry has subtleties about it. And you only understand those subtleties when you're in that business. It's sort of like the do's and don'ts, or I don't know exactly, just subtleties, I think is the best word I can come up with. And so you want someone who sort of understands those. They understand what the relationships are between distributors and suppliers and salespeople in any particular industry, because again, you got to keep those people balanced, and you don't want to put out a campaign of some sort that offends one of them or the other. So to me, those are the big things that I would look for.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's great advice. Great. I think we should wrap it up. Yeah. Thanks for another interesting interview, Bela. This was, I think, really fascinating for me. And I started by saying I'm always interested in learning more about branding and messaging. And here we are, less than an hour later, and I've learned a lot about branding and messaging. So thanks. Listeners, I hope you got something out of today's episode as well. If you have questions about what we've discussed, as always, please feel free to get in touch with us. Our email is bela.and.mike@gmail.com.
Hey, and please do follow us on your favorite podcasting application if you haven't already done so. And if you like the content in the show, tell one of your friends about it. We'd love to get some more listeners. So signing off from upstate New York. See you all soon.
Sounds great, Bela, from over here in Münster, Germany. See you next time.